Hey up guys, I'm Mason, the blind wrestling fan, and this is the WITD Weekly podcast number 11. If you enjoy this episode, you know what to do. First things first, let's talk about the women's title scene. Considering that she's supposed to be the boss, Sasha Banks is extremely easy to manipulate as shown here. She starts off Smackdown coming down to the ring for a TLC contract signing, but when she opens the envelope, the contract's not there. She gets all paranoid, has a go at Adam Pearce thinking that he's in cahoots with Carmella. Mella appears on the Tron and says that she's always 4 steps ahead of Sasha. She sends her sommelier along with the contract down to deal with Sasha. Sasha gets all annoyed. She says that she's going to bend Carmella backwards, make her touch her own spine and cry, before she challenges her to a title match in the main event and then attacks the sommelier. That poor sommelier, that is totally not in his job description. If she wanted someone to run the contract down, she should have got a messenger boy or something. But yeah, Sasha, really easy to manipulate here. Carmella getting exactly what she wanted. Later in the show, we get a quick promo from Carmella. She says that Sasha may think that she's the boss, but Carmella is untouchable. She claims she made Sasha relevant when she came for a title and says that tonight she's gonna beat the disrespect out of Banks. Then she makes the sommelier fetch her some champagne because, you know, when you've got a big title match coming up in the main event, the thing that you really want to do is just chug some champagne. Maybe wait till afterwards, eh, Carmella? I'm sure that some people would have been thinking that this main event was going to be pointless. They were just giving away this match on SmackDown and it was going to make the TLC match less important. But it was all about the story. It was designed to get Carmella some heat, and I think they did a pretty good job of doing that. First off, Carmella gets a big, grand, obnoxious entrance, and when the match actually starts, it doesn't take long for Mella to get into the driver's seat. She's screaming at Sasha that she is the best, not Banks. She sends Sasha into the ropes, gets a drop toe hold, and goes for the code of silence. She can't get it locked in, but she does manage to stay in control. Right before the commercial break, she sends Sasha into the apron, face first. After commercial, Carmella is still in control. She smashes Sasha's arm into the ring post. Sasha desperately tries to get back into it. She goes for a backstabber, but Carmella avoids it. Mella goes up top, comes off with a top rope cross body. She goes for the code of silence again, but Sasha counters and gets the bank statement, at which point the sommelier gets involved, distracts Sasha, who gets extremely mad. She attacks the sommelier, drives Carmella into the corner, and unloads with a vicious volley of strikes, which lasts until the ref disqualifies her. I really liked all of this. In fact, I think that they've done a great job in general with Carmella over the last couple of weeks. Bringing her back and putting her straight into the title scene makes her feel important. She's done some fantastic promo work. I really like the stuff from last week about how all of this comes so easily to her compared to Sasha, who's worked all of her life for this. And then this week she makes Sasha look like an absolute fool, manipulating her into putting the title on the line and then not even really trying to win, just playing mind games. She got some decent offense during this match, and it makes it look like she's not just a sitting duck, that she does stand a chance in the TLC match. And then she gets some nice heat at the end after the match, beating down Sasha and smashing a bottle over her spine. Just some great work that, in all honesty, is really making me look forward to the TLC match and seeing what is happening. I hope Carmella wins. She won't, but I really wish she would. Next up, let's talk about Sami Zayn and Big E. I love Sami Zayn. I think that he's been doing great work as the Intercontinental Champion, and this week he's just at it again. The same old stuff, but it's so good. Backstage, he's kicking off. He's infuriated that he doesn't have a shirt, especially when he realises that Big E has a shirt, and not just one, but a whole box of them. Then Big E tells Sami to relax. He reveals that he's designed a shirt just for Sami, but whatever's on it, Sami hates it. Leading in to Sami's match with Big E, he's coming down the ramp and he's just talking more trash. He lists off all the people that he's beaten and says that it's an absolute travesty that he doesn't have a shirt of his own. Not that he wants one, because he doesn't want to support the rampant consumerism in WWE, but it's a matter of respect. He's a great champion, and he doesn't have a shirt of his own. Personally, I completely agree with Sami. He's done some great work. Why has he not got a t-shirt, damn it? The first part of the match is commentary just bickering. They go back and forth on whether Sami is a good champion or not. Big E does a decent job of keeping Sami on the defensive. Going into the commercial break, Big E hits a splash, but when we get back from the commercial, Sami's back in charge. He hits a knee to the face, but Big E kicks out quickly. Sami goes up top, comes off, delivers an elbow, and starts mocking Big E. But the jokes don't last long, because Big E fires up and hits a trio of belly-to-belly suplexes and a splash. Sami almost steals the match with a surprise roll-up, but Big E kicks out. Sami goes for a crossbody, Big E rolls through, goes for the big ending, but gets his eyes raked by Zayn. Zayn goes for the haluva kick, but Big E counters and hits a uranagi. Sami pretends that his hand's hurting him and then cheap shots Big E. This pisses Big E off big time. Sami flees to the outside and Big E gives chase. Sami runs under the ring, Big E goes after him, Zayn emerges and gets back in the ring as Big E gets counted out. This is just another week in a long run of entertaining weeks for Sami Zayn. This paranoid conspiracy theorist, everyone's out to get me version of Sami is so damn entertaining. It's right up my alley. Usually I don't enjoy chicken shit heels, but Sami pulls it off so well that you just want to see more and find out who's gonna get a shot at him next, who's eventually gonna kick his head in and shut his mouth. Meanwhile, Big E gets to be all fired up and serious and on the chase, and he's probably going to end up winning the IC title. It's a shame that Sami's reign has to come to an end, but I actually think that Sami's character will work better having lost the title. He can make all sorts of excuses and talk about how he was screwed, how Big E cheated, how he was chosen by WWE to stop Sami Zayn, and it'll just give Sami more fire to be this paranoid conspiracy theorist that he is right now. And I'm just proper looking forward to seeing them have a pay-per-view match and Big E get his moment and Sami just get pushed even further off the edge. It's so good, this stuff right now. I tell you what else I loved, Chad Gable and Otis. Look, at some point this might end up jumping the shark, it might end up being crap, but for this week I proper enjoyed it and found it pretty funny. We get an Alpha Academy skit where Chad has Otis train with a blindfold on so that he can attack him and make him aware of his surroundings at all time. Great stuff. Then they're asked about how they feel about their match with Cesaro and Nakamura tonight. Chad says that he's going to turn Otis from a raw lump of clay, no offence, to Michelangelo's David. Otis says that if Chad can get to the Olympics with his small stature, no offence, then imagine what he can do with this prime steak. Cesaro appears and he makes fun of Chad for being small and says that he's probably one of Santa's elves. Not the best insult coming from Cesaro, but hey. Honestly, this match didn't go that long, and it certainly wasn't a match of the year candidate, but what we did get was pretty enjoyable. Essentially, Chad would have Otis tag in, take control, and then Chad would tag himself back in. He'd eat a load of offense and inevitably need to tag Otis back in. There was a pretty cool point where Chad landed on his feet from an exploder suplex just to show how athletic he was, and I really enjoyed that. In the end, Otis comes in, runs over Cesaro, hits him with a discus clothesline, gets the splash, goes for the caterpillar, but Chad stops him. Chad says that he wants to finish it and he makes Otis tag out. Chad goes up top, comes off, gets caught by Cesaro, swung around and nailed with the Kinshasa before getting covered. Backstage, even though it was clearly Chad's fault that they lost, of course he blames Otis. He tells Otis that when he asked him to tag out, he didn't actually want him to tag out. He was trying to teach him to be assertive, to make his own decisions and do what he needed to do, but Otis failed the test. I thought this was absolutely brilliant. Chad comes across as such a dick here, and eventually Otis is going to go ballistic, and it's going to be a great match, because you know what? Otis is great, and so is Chad Gable, and I just think that if they do this right, the eventual blow-off will be must-see. It'll be a really good match, and I'm just looking forward to seeing the journey there, because this was really entertaining. I love Chad just being an absolute slime ball, clearly trying to take the credit, ending up losing the match for them, and then still finding a way to blame Otis. Now we get to what is, without a doubt, week on week, the best part of Smackdown. It's the Roman Reigns storyline. Jay approaches Roman and wants to know if they're okay. Roman assures him that they are, and they have a bit of an awkward back and forth. Meanwhile, Owens is making his way to the ring, and Jay begs Roman to let him go and teach Kevin a lesson. Roman basically tells him, yeah, go get him. Owens sets up hardware in the ring, and he cuts a scathing promo. He says that he's got some bad news for Roman. Despite what happened last week, even though he knows that Roman is better than he's ever been, he still doesn't fear him. Roman claims to fight for his family, but really, he's having his family fight for him. TLC is the most important match of Owens' career, and he needs all the help that he can get. But his family isn't a part of this industry. They support him by watching from home, so they can't physically help him win the match. But he does have a couple of friends that can. First he introduces Chair. Chair is cold and unforgiving, says Owens. Chair will pay Roman back for every single chair shot that he gave him last week. He'll leave Roman bruised and maybe even break a few bones. Then he introduces Table. Table is hard and tough to break, but when you do, she's so welcoming, and she's looking forward to receiving Roman at TLC. Bit inappropriate that, Kevin. Roman is a married man. Finally, he introduces Ladder. Ladder is rough around the edges, but he's Kevin's favourite friend to work with, and he's going to help Owens reclaim the Universal Championship. He says that Roman can keep the head of the table because he's going to do everything he can to get to the top of the ladder. He's about to talk more about his family, but Jay comes out and attacks him. He doesn't stay on top for long though, because Kevin fires up and ends up hitting a pop-up powerbomb, sending Jay through a ladder. Roman is about to come out, but Heyman tells him, don't do this. You're doing it on his time, do it on your own time, don't let him control you, and Roman leaves it. Backstage, Owens is fired up and on the warpath. He's searching for Roman and he's confronted by Kayla Braxton. He demands to know if Kayla knows where Roman is and says that he didn't want to have to do that to Jay, but Roman brought Owens' family into it, so Owens attacked his family. He's then blindsided by the man himself. Roman lays a beatdown upon Owens and he sends him into something, I'm not particularly sure what, but it sounded like a locker or something, and it just rattles as if he absolutely battered him into it. He then introduces himself to the Owens family, breaks the fourth wall and speaks directly to them. He says that he is the head of the table. He's the man that put a roof over the Owens family head, money in their pockets and food on the table. He says that they need to talk some sense into Owens, because if they don't, there's going to be nothing left. Honestly, in my opinion, Roman can do no wrong at the minute. Everything that he touches turns to gold. He's turned Jay into a superstar, and I've never been more invested in Kevin Owens than I am right now. This fired up, loose cannon version of him that refuses to be intimidated, refuses to back down, is so interesting, and I'm well behind him. I can't wait to see him get his hands on Roman during TLC, and honestly, I can't remember the last time that I was this excited for a TLC match. I love this version of Roman, getting all personal and cold and calculating. That fourth wall breaking promo was fantastic. Bringing Owens' family into it just gives it that extra personal touch, makes it feel more like a shoot style feud, and it's just the best thing going on in Smackdown right now. I love everything to do with this. Oh, and now it's time to talk about Raw, and I really wish that I didn't have to. I can't even express to you how much I wish that I could just skip over this completely and get to NXT. Unsurprisingly, this week's Raw was the lowest rated Raw ever, which is something that's been said multiple times this year. It just keeps getting lower and lower and lower, and they wonder why. With the decisions that they're making right now, the stuff that they're offering us, the crap, unwatchable stuff that they're giving us, and they wonder why they get the lowest ratings ever. This week's Raw was horrible. Look, you might have noticed that I don't run through the entirety of these shows. I look at them and I cherry pick what I found interesting. Let's look at Smackdown. The Sasha stuff, found that interesting, I talked about it. The Sami Zayn stuff, the Chad Gable and Otis stuff, the Roman Reigns stuff, that's all interesting, I'll talk about it. And the stuff that I'm not as bothered about, I just leave. And usually there's at least a couple of things that I want to talk about, that I think, yeah, that'll be interesting to talk about on the podcast. And when I'm looking through Raw this week, there's just nothing that I wanted to talk about. And I'm going to talk about a few things, but it's not like I can talk about them in a positive light, because there was just nothing on offer that I felt like had any substance, that was entertaining, that was intriguing or dramatic. It was just thing after thing that was crap and unwatchable and makes you wonder, why are you doing this? To start with, let's talk about the women's tag team storyline, aka the Lana storyline. Now, I have swung back and forth on this. Months and months of Lana just getting beaten down and put through tables and beaten down and put through tables, and it's just been endless. And there's been a couple of points where I thought, okay, I quite like what's going on here. And then they did the Survivor Series finish where she was the sole survivor for no good reason, for not trying, after not doing anything. She didn't have a big moment, she was just there and happened to win, and then she sold it as if it was this big career defining moment. And then she got with Asuka, and I thought, this could be good. You've got this dominant veteran who's absolutely amazing, and she can teach Lana to be a winning wrestler. And it's just been weeks of them getting one over on Shayna and Nia and making them look like absolute idiots, and making Shayna Baszler, who is another one of the most dominant women in NXT history, and they just made her look like an absolute idiot on multiple occasions. Last week they give Asuka and Shayna away just for nothing on a random Raw, and then this week they have Lana versus Nia. And despite being absolutely terrified last week, Lana goes one-on-one with Nia, and she actually does a good job. She goes after Nia's legs, and she manages, in the end, to pull off the shock victory. This is good. It's actually working. Asuka's training is actually working. Then afterwards, Shayna and Nia beat down Lana. Again, this is good. You're getting heat on the women's tag team champions. They're not just going to accept getting beaten by Lana. So Shayna does her arm thing. She stomps Lana's elbow and Lana sells it as if she's being murdered. Asuka eventually runs down just that little bit too late. Then we get this bit where Lana gets checked up on. She's getting looked at by the medics and she actually sells it really well. She's just quietly crying to herself and she's just selling it as if she's had this horrible, awful experience. And I quite like it, and I'm thinking, TLC will be interesting now. Is she going to manage to get her own back? Is she going to manage to get some revenge? And Shayna ends up going one-on-one with Dana Brooke. She tries to stomp Dana's arm, but Dana actually avoids it. She also manages to avoid the Kirifuda clutch. And in the end, Nia ends up getting involved, and Shayna is disqualified. They then try to beat down Dana Brooke, but Mandy Rose returns, lets loose with a kendo stick, and they're joined by Asuka, and the faces stand tall. And they sell it that Asuka needs a new tag team partner because Lana's been written off. So after all this time, having Lana repeatedly put through tables and beaten up week after week, getting that Sole Survivor win, getting in this tag team with Asuka, and finally getting to the point where it seems like Asuka and Lana might win the Women's Tag Team Championships, you do this. After giving away Shayna and Asuka, after making Shayna look like an absolute idiot week on week, you do this. You have Lana get written off. The only way this works, in my opinion, is if Lana is actually still in TLC. The fact that we've got to the go home episode and you do this, you have Lana actually beat Nia clean, what's the point? The TLC match should have been the point where they win the tag team championships by Lana pinning Nia, and they celebrate and Asuka congratulates her, and it just looks like Asuka's made her into a winning wrestler. But instead, you just throw it away. You just absolutely piss it away, and you're now acting like she's been written off. And I may feel a little bit more forgiving if Lana is still in the match, but even then it doesn't matter because she's already pinned Nia. She's already got her retribution, her revenge. She's got one up on Nia. We already know that she can beat her, so the drama isn't there. And as for Asuka, who is going to be her partner? Is it going to be Dana Brooke? Is it going to be Mandy Rose? Why would that even matter now? Why is that important? And if they then win the tag team championships, just what is the point? And it's so annoying and pointless, and it gets me so frustrated. They have something that is at least a bit good, that has some potential, and then they just completely waste it. If Lana isn't in this TLC match, it's gonna be so stupid. Next, we'll talk about Randy Orton versus Bray Wyatt. And this feud is an open goal. And so far, they've done an alright job with it, but this week was an absolute miss, in my opinion. Last week, the fun and games was fine. Bray being the game show host and just all of that silly bollocks was fine. But this week was the go home episode, and they had the opportunity to step things up and make it a bit intense, but instead we just had more silly bollocks. Bray apologises to Randy and says that things got out of hand because the Fiend has a mind of his own. He knows that he's got things about himself that he needs to fix, but he wants to have as much fun with Randy as he can, because after TLC he doesn't know what will be left of Randy. So he tells some lame jokes that I won't even repeat because they're so terrible. And then Randy interrupts him and cuts a promo, and it's just more Randy Orton BS, basically the same stuff as last week. And then he says that if Bray wants to play games, that's fine, and challenges him to a game of hide and seek. Yeah, that's right, hide and seek. This should be an open goal. It's Randy Orton, the Viper, the cold, calculated psychopath, and the Fiend, this hellish, demonic entity, the stuff of nightmares. They could be doing some really cool, interesting stuff with this, and they just have them play hide and seek. And then we get skits of Bray looking for Randy backstage and interacting with Riddle, and there's just no one on the show that Bray should be further away from than Riddle, because the stuff that Riddle is doing right now, where he just says bro in front of everything and pitches lame business ideas, is just the lamest shit ever. And eventually Bray finds Randy and they have a brawl, and it all just evolves into noise. I wouldn't actually know what happens because the commentators say jack shit. Luckily there's recaps out there, so I do know that Randy puts Bray in a box and sets it on fire, and now we're getting a Funhouse Inferno match at TLC. The Fiend ends up appearing and he attacks Randy and gives him the mandible claw, and that's that. And I get it. I'm sure that some people found this entertaining, but I just feel like if it wasn't for the PG rating, for the family orientated way that they feel that they need to do Raw, this could have been an interesting feud. At the end of the day, the Fiend is supposed to be this disturbing creature that is the stuff of nightmares. He's supposed to be scary, and then you've got Randy Orton, who's supposed to be this brutal, unfeeling psychopath, and you could just be doing really good stuff. I am not the kind of guy that's an AEW fan, right? I stopped watching AEW quite a while ago because I'm not the sort of person that wants to come on here week after week and complain, and it's just not for me. But the stuff that they do really well are those brutal feuds. The Kenny Omega John Moxley match with all the barbed wire and all that lot. That is what this feud could be. But instead they have them playing hide and seek, and it just, you wonder why you're getting low ratings. This is why, because of all of this stuff that I'm talking about. And the final thing that I'm going to talk about when it comes to Raw, because I just want to move on, is the WWE Championship scene. Now, the last couple of weeks have been okay. There's been some good stuff, but this week was a black hole of interest. I have negative interest in this feud now. Miz, Morrison and AJ present The Nightmare Before TLC, a story narrated by Miz in the style of The Night Before Christmas, with all the rhyming crap that you can muster. Also, with AJ and Morrison providing voice acting and sound effects. It ends with Miz saying that he might cash in, which AJ doesn't like. Absolutely terrible. That's terrible to start with. Then Sheamus takes on AJ. Sheamus ends up losing that match, which is fine, I guess, because AJ's the number one contender to the WWE Championship. Makes sense that he'd pick up a win. But guess what? Keith Lee, who's been on the fringes of this feud, telling Sheamus not to turn on Drew, etc., takes on Miz and Morrison in a handicap match and loses. Keith Lee, the man that was basically unstoppable in NXT, the man that got a clean win over Randy Orton a couple of months ago, being beaten by the hapless idiots that are Miz and Morrison, and I don't understand why they're doing it. They've got a star on their hands. Keith Lee is a future WWE champion for sure, or should be. I don't know whether he will be, not when you're doing this sort of thing. Okay, yeah, there was two guys, but they're hapless idiots. They are the biggest idiots in WWE, and you have Keith Lee lose to them. And then we get the title ascension ceremony where the title gets raised up into the rafters. And AJ comes out and he says to Drew that maybe at TLC, AJ won't be the only one that Drew has to fight. And Miz, Morrison, AJ and Omos just lay Drew out. They beat him down and he does a pretty good job of trying to fight back, but eventually he gets put on a table, AJ goes up top, throws himself off and puts Drew through the table. AJ Styles versus Drew McIntyre should easily have been a great feud. It should have been one of the best feuds of this year. You've got AJ Styles, who's an absolute veteran, always has great matches, does some fantastic character work. He's so good on the mic, and having this badass, big, massive bodyguard backing him up that he doesn't even really need because he's good enough to beat Drew on his own is awesome. And then you've got Drew, who's this charismatic, badass, athletic champion who's just coming off the back of an amazing match with Roman Reigns. And if you'd have just let them do the thing and cut promos on each other and let AJ get a little bit of heat, this could have been a great feud. Even with Miz there, this could have been fine. And over the last couple of weeks I've been able to sort of forgive some of the crapper things, like Miz and Morrison doing absolutely awful impressions of Drew and Sheamus, because at the end of the day I actually thought that it was pretty cool that Drew had everyone coming for him. He had AJ with his big bodyguard coming for him, Miz with the Money in the Bank briefcase, and Morrison backing him up coming for him. And then the added thing of Sheamus, of will he turn, won't he turn, is he going to turn on him or not? And it just made you wonder, how is Drew going to get out of this still champion? But after this week, it's just sucked all of my interest out, and I'm so disappointed in it, and I feel like they could have done so much better. The Nightmare Before TLC thing was just awful. I actually had a question this week from the Good Cop Bad Cop Wrestling podcast, who said, considering Raw reached an all-time low rating this week, with Kenny Omega working a storyline with Impact Wrestling, if WWE were to do something similar, would it help or hinder the ratings, considering that it would make it look like they were copying AEW? Talk about a hard question. I don't really know how to answer this. The truth is, I'd love to see them work with someone. I would love to see them forge a working relationship with someone. But how would they ever make that work these days? They have tried so long to keep all the other companies down. They've tried so hard to act like they don't exist, to poach their talent, to hoard talent and make sure that no other company can get a hold of them. That's one of the problems that they've got right now. They have so much talent that they don't know what to do with it all. And they've done that so that other companies can't have them, and that's purely why. And I don't know who would ever agree to work with them at this point. Ring of Honor would probably be one of the more interesting ones, because at the end of the day they've been left out in the cold, and there was all those rumours back last year that there was a little bit of heat between Ring of Honor and All Elite because they left them high and dry. And maybe that would be interesting, but I can't see how they'd make it work. The most interesting one would be NJPW, and if that could happen, that would definitely help ratings, I think. Bringing in the NJPW audience, putting eyes on the product that way, would definitely help the ratings. Yeah, it would look like they were copying AEW, but that in a way would generate more interest, because people would be like, oh well, who's going to be better? Is it going to be the All Elite Impact war, or is it going to be the NJPW WWE war? And that would be good for the business in general, but I just don't see how they would ever make it work, considering the way that they've acted towards all of the other companies over the last however many years. Thanks for the question though. Well, that was a bit of an extended rant, wasn't it? I wasn't quite anticipating how frustrated I was going to get. I hope it was entertaining rather than stressful. I think it's the first time that I've ever had an actual full-on rant on this podcast. So, yeah, at least now we can move on to something a bit more entertaining, a bit more positive. It's time to talk about NXT. And the first thing we're going to talk about is the number one contenders match between Pete Dunne and Kyle O'Reilly. I've already said on this podcast that O'Reilly and Balor had my absolute favourite match of this year. It was fantastic, and Pete Dunne is another person that I would love to see go one-on-one with Finn Balor, so I was invested in this match instantly and didn't really mind who won. I'm going to run through it. Both guys make their way down to the ring, but before the match can officially get underway, all hell breaks loose. The Undisputed Era, the Kings, Drake and Dane and Breezango all brawl. They fight until eventually they spill backstage and it leaves O'Reilly and Dunne one-on-one. The match begins and O'Reilly almost immediately goes for a submission that Dunne avoids. Dunne starts clobbering O'Reilly with shin kicks, delivers knees to the back and gets him in a modified surfboard. Dunne manages to avoid a cross arm breaker attempt. He nails O'Reilly in the face with a pump kick. He tries for an X-Plex, but O'Reilly avoids it. He goes after O'Reilly's fingers and they end up spilling to the outside where they slug it out until they just about beat the 10 count. And then Vic Joseph goes, "You won't miss a second of this action," as we go to picture in picture. And of course, I can't see the picture in picture, so I missed a lot of action. After the commercial, Dunne tries for the bitter end, but O'Reilly reverses into a submission. O'Reilly manages to nail Dunne in the face with a knee, but Dunne answers with an X-Plex. O'Reilly gets back into it, he delivers a knee to the midsection and lets loose with a plethora of strikes. They head up to the top rope. Pete goes after the fingers. Kyle tries for a German suplex, but Dunne lands on his feet and delivers a kick. And then they go to commercial again. After the commercial, there's a big NXT chant and both guys send each other into the turnbuckles face first. Dunne pops off a knee to O'Reilly's face and delivers a powerbomb, but it doesn't put O'Reilly away, so he just stomps him in the neck. They go back and forth, trading submissions, countering, transitioning, avoiding, and then O'Reilly hits a brainbuster as the fans chant "Fight Forever." O'Reilly hits a massive jumping knee that knocks Dunne's mouthguard clean out, but Dunne kicks out of the cover. And then finally, O'Reilly goes up top, comes off and delivers a knee to the back of Dunne's neck and picks up the win to ensure that we get O'Reilly Balor 2. This was an absolutely fantastic match, and honestly I'm not sure why it wasn't the main event of the show. I had no idea who was going to win, but I wanted O'Reilly to win so bad. He is the heart and soul of NXT right now. Honestly, I feel like he is the Daniel Bryan of NXT. He's just so good, and this match was just back and forth and brutal strikes and so many knees to the face. I just was on the edge of my seat the entire time. It sucked that they went to the picture in picture a few times, especially considering that I'm like the one person that can't watch what's going on in picture, but at the same time I just loved everything that I actually did get to see, and O'Reilly picking up the win is definitely a plus point. Balor cuts a promo where he says that O'Reilly might have broken his jaw in 3 places, but he still lost. And at New Year's Evil, it's not going to be O'Reilly Balor 2, it's going to be O'Reilly Balor the end. Honestly, I have a feeling that O'Reilly's picking up the win here. I don't know why they would do it again if O'Reilly's not going to pick it up, and I just want it so bad. I am ready for Kyle O'Reilly as NXT champion. This week was a good week for The Way. Johnny Gargano and Austin Theory have a tag team match with Kushida and Leon Ruff. There's plenty of back and forth here, Leon Ruff getting beaten down, Kushida running wild, and in the end, Leon Ruff hits a flying cutter. It looks like he's going to be able to pick up the win, but he doesn't realise that Austin Theory has made the tag, and he gets hit with Theory's finisher, and the Way pick up the win. Indy Hartwell goes one-on-one with Shotzi Blackheart. Shotzi cuts a promo where she says that her war with Candice is far from over. Candice cheated at War Games and now she wants to go around talking about being a general, Miss War Games, and stealing trophies from a Little League team. That's a serious accusation there, Shotzi. Unless you've got some strong evidence, then you probably shouldn't make those sort of allegations. Anyway, the match between Shotzi and Indy doesn't last all that long. Shotzi is fired up, but Indy does a pretty good job of managing to avoid her offense. At one point, Shotzi goes for a senton, but Indy manages to avoid it so that Shotzi doesn't get all of it. Indy hits a full Nelson slam that Shotzi kicks out of. Shotzi hits a drop kick to the face. They fight on the outside, but because the Way can't be asked to see whether Indy loses or not, Austin Theory hands her the trophy, the allegedly stolen trophy, and Indy decks Shotzi with it, causing the disqualification. I think this is the right way to go, to be honest. Johnny and Austin picking up the win, not necessarily in a cheating sort of way, just outsmarting Leon Ruff was a good decision, and I like Indy Hartwell managing to actually put up a good fight against Shotzi, but then taking the cheap way out. This stable is actually pretty interesting, and I'm looking forward to seeing where they go with it, so I think that this was a nice, solid start to build them up. Karrion Kross returns to in-ring action against Desmond Troy, who he squashes pretty easily. He hits a Doomsday Saito, locks in the Kross jacket and wins the match. It then turns out that Kross will be having a match against Damian Priest at New Year's Evil, which should be pretty good. New Year's Evil, it turns out, will be hosted by Dexter Lumis. As Wade Barrett points out, this is pretty weird, considering that Dexter Lumis doesn't talk, but I'm actually quite looking forward to seeing how they handle this, and if they do it right, it can be pretty entertaining. Tommaso Ciampa has a match against Tyler Rust, with Timothy Thatcher sitting ringside. At one point, the match spills to the outside and Thatcher takes a tumble, and he's escorted backstage because he's getting mad. Despite getting some decent offense against Ciampa and having a really good showing with the commentary selling it as if he's a future star of NXT, eventually Ciampa gets the win with Willow's Bell. Toni Storm and Ria Ripley renew their rivalry, and honestly, I was quite excited about this considering that I was in Blackpool when they had their big match. Storm cuts a promo where she talks about the fact that Ripley only arrived in NXT because Storm ran her out of NXT UK. She says the last time that they were in the ring together was Worlds Collide, and Rhea got the win, but Storm isn't the same person as she was. Back then, she respected Rhea, but now she doesn't give a damn about acceptance or approval or respect. The only thing she cares about is the NXT Women's Championship. Rhea cuts a promo of her own, but I don't think that it was anywhere near as strong as Storm's. She says that she's not the same person as she was, but it doesn't matter whether she's facing the new Storm or the old Storm. She's still the same piece of trash that she's always known. The match itself was pretty good, but it was nothing compared to the O'Reilly-Dunn match, and I'm not quite sure why they had this as the main event when that match was so good. They go back and forth, Rhea hits some drop kicks, Toni hits a bridging German suplex at one point. Rhea just keeps trying to put Storm away. At one point she sends her into the turnbuckles face first. She thinks that she's got it won, but Storm kicks out. She hits a trio of leg drops at one point, and then towards the end of the match she goes for the Riptide, but Raquel Gonzalez comes out and interrupts. Toni ends up taking a tumble, and the ref checks on her and doesn't notice that Raquel sends Ripley face first into the post, which allows Toni to capitalise, hit the Storm Zero and pick up the win. Despite not being as good as the number one contenders match, I do think that this was pretty effective in terms of storytelling. I'm really enjoying this new Toni Storm. The attitude that she has in her promos that she's cutting has just reached this new level of intensity, and I'm actually quite looking forward to seeing her have a match against Io Shirai, because I think when she finally meets her, it's gonna be damn good. It also pushes forward the Ripley Gonzalez storyline, and honestly, again, when they get in the ring again, it's gonna be mint. Just two powerful women beating the crap out of each other. It's pretty interesting though, because Toni Storm and Raquel Gonzalez are both gunning for Io Shirai, and at the minute they're sort of working together, but at some point it's going to break down. So there's lots of interesting stuff going on in the women's division at the minute. Well, that's all we've got time for this week. If you've got anything that you want to say, whether it's your thoughts on this week's topics or anything else, you've got multiple options. You can drop them in the comment section. You can find, follow and get in touch on Twitter at Mason_WITD, or you can email wrestlinginthedark@gmail.com. I'll see you for the TLC review, but until then you should take care. I'm off, and you should have a good one.